an amazing opportunity and
It
a
is.
gift that we have had as an industry. And if we discharge those opportunities and responsibilities correctly, and when the
Mhm.
magic happens, people ought to be able to go home at night and when their heads hit the pillow, go, I
Yeah.
did some good today.
Welcome to another edition of the Growth Game Podcast. I'm your host, Paul DeLuca from Emeritus Capital. We're very excited today to be joined by Richard Wahlquist, CEO of American Staffing Association. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule 2 weeks before Staffing World to come on the podcast with us today. But Richard, thank you so much for joining us today.
Paul, it's a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. I know we've met briefly over the years. I always love your intros at the conferences, but it's great to have a little bit of a one-on-one. And I'm very confident that the group of people that are constantly listening in will be able to find this conversation interesting. So I thought it would be really great to just find out, what's your background? How did you get into that? How did you become the CEO of American Staffing Association and every day think and talk about staffing? What's your journey?
So it's certainly nothing that I had ever planned or even imagined as a young man growing up. I kind of fell into the world of politics, working
Hmm.
political campaigns and
Hmm.
being hired by the general counsel of Kelly Services
Ah,
to be the director of government affairs back in the day. And now we're going back to the 1980s.
okay.
The association that I'm currently the CEO of was called the National Association of Temporary Services. And it was a very small organization. I think they had 5 employees. And kind of following an industry model, they outsourced virtually everything, as most startup organizations and associations do,
Yeah.
to volunteers. One of the most important opportunities for the industry was to come together under the umbrella of then the National Association of Temporary Services to fight bad regulation, which could
Ah,
really impede the growth of the industry and constrain our ability to provide all these really wonderful jobs that we provide to people, enabling careers and lives. And so they had a legal legislative committee. That legal legislative committee was chaired by a guy named Cedric Richner, who was the general counsel for Kelly Services. And Cedric had the time, the inclination, the expertise, and a track record of stellar success. And he was literally riding the circuits, going state to state to state. As bad legislative proposals were introduced, he would
yeah,
pull together a little coalition of industry members, and they would do lobbying 101.
yeah.
So they would outreach to their legislators. They would then testify at committee hearings, lobby the governor, try to get an outcome that's a good one. Our industry has never been an industry that's got its hand out saying, "Hey,
Right.
government, what more can you do for me? We
Very
want, we
true.
want, we want."
Yeah.
To the contrary, I mean, we represent lots of entrepreneurs and certainly people with an entrepreneur growth mindset. And you know those folks because you work with them every day. Our mantra is government, make sure the roads are safe, make
Yeah.
sure the country is safe, make sure that, financial markets don't go
Hmm.
off the rail. But for the business sector, and make sure that people's lives are safe. But for the
Yeah.
business sector, we don't need a lot of interference because a regulation is a synonym for a tax. It's going to
Yeah.
drive up the cost of goods and services. So Cedric was doing this for a number of years, and the issues as the industry grew, we became more of an industry in the spotlight. And
Yeah.
with that, the number of issues that we had to take on began to multiply. So Cedric brought me in, and I rode the circuit with him first side by side, and then I kind of took over that responsibility, and I worked with then the association, NATS. And when I would drop into a state capital, the first thing that I would do is I would round up a bunch of local owner operators,
Yeah.
who many of whom had deep ties in the community and very often ties to elected officials, which
Hmm.
is something I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
over a course of several years, working on issues on behalf of the staffing industry, eventually across every single one of the states in Canada, Puerto Rico. I think the only state that I haven't been to in an official capacity representing the industry is Alaska.
That's it, huh? Okay.
And
We're
we
going to
had,
have to fix that this year, Richard. Richard, we're going to be at Staffing Association. You and I have got to find a couple of Alaskan companies and find a way to get you there just so you can full
I'm
circle.
looking, I am looking forward to that, Paul. Looking
Uh,
forward. So you gotta move the calendar forward a little bit. And unfortunately, Cedric passed as a
mhm.
relatively young man of a congenital issue that none of
Hmm.
us knew that he had.
So sad.
And it was at a period of time in which the association was beginning to have a little more capacity. They were building up their membership.
Yeah.
And just to kind of take you back one step, the association was founded in 1966
Oh, wow. I didn't
by a
realize it
group,
was that had been around that long.
yeah,
Wow.
by a group of 13 people that got together representing mostly large companies, but also some regional companies
Uh-huh.
here in the Washington, D.C. area. And it just kind of came to them that, look, we can try to fight these fights on our own. We can
Okay.
also try to publicize the good things that the industry is doing on its own.
Yep.
But yeah, it's intuitive, right? There are
Yeah.
strengths in numbers. And so the idea was, hey, we're going to be good, strong competitors out on the street, but here's an opportunity for us to kind of check our guns at the door and all of a sudden, lock arms side to side and say, this industry is important. We
Yeah.
believe that it's important for the future of the country, for the future of the American economy, and for American people. And of course, this is a story we tell not just in the United States, but all over the world. So the time came when the then board of directors and the then CEO of the organization, Sam Sacco, said, we've really got to begin to professionalize our staff.
Yeah.
Cedric is no longer with us. It probably
Hmm.
makes sense for us to begin to have our own internal legal legislative staff.
Hmm.
So in April of 1989, I moved myself and in July my then young family from Troy, Michigan, which is
Yeah.
where Kelly Services is based,
Right.
to Washington, D.C. I was
Okay.
brought in as effectively the number two. I'd say the deputy CEO, and that sounds kind of impressive and fancy, but again, I was probably the sixth employee
Yeah.
hired. So it was a very, very flat hierarchy there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that I learned then, and it's something that I tell everyone we hire here today,
Hmm.
if you are a person that needs to be bound by a black and white job description, if
Yeah.
you're a person that has a difficult time multitasking, if you're a person that doesn't really envision wearing a number of hats, this is not the opportunity for you. In
Right.
my case, I came from a big, tall, gleaming office tower where we were highly niched and highly specialized, and we had all sorts of extra, services that large corporations typically have. And
Sure.
I went from that to, being roll up your sleeves, and if a mailing needs to go out on Friday night, Richard, it's all hands on deck.
Right.
I wouldn't trade the opportunity for, all the money in the world because it
That's
was really an
amazing.
opportunity to not only help shape the industry that I had fallen in love with after years of doing the advocacy through Kelly Services, but
Yeah.
also really to get my foot in the door with a small business and see
Right.
where I might help Sam drive that business. That went real well for about 9 years. Sam got a job opportunity that he couldn't refuse. That was a
Yep.
time when Wall Street was quite enamored with roll up companies that
Yep. Oh,
turned
I
into
remember. I remember Sam was very involved in those.
so a couple of folks with some dollars said, Sam, you know everybody in the industry. We think this
Yeah.
would be an opportunity for you and also an opportunity for some of these large, successful regional companies to
Yeah.
kind of throw their hats in the ring together. We'll package them up as a unified company. It will now be larger than just a region. It'll be probably national in scope, and we'll take it to Wall Street, and we'll be able to do more things with the
Mhm.
capital that'll be
Yeah.
available to all of us. Paul, timing's everything. That was the
Yeah.
year Wall Street got a little bit sour on IPOs, and it was a
Yeah.
year in which Goldman Sachs actually withdrew their IPO.
Oh,
And so that little band eventually disbanded,
yeah.
and Sam began doing what he actually learned to do very, very effectively when he was rolling the companies up, and that's working with mergers and
Yeah.
acquisitions. And
Sam was an I mean icon in M&A and staffing.
absolutely, and he's doing that to this day.
Yeah. I haven't talked to Sam in many years. That's great to hear. I got to reach out to him.
You will see him at Staffing World in Nashville. So, as they
Nice.
say, it went from being here and principally in charge of state legislative activities for the organization as the deputy CEO, also involved with chapters and involved with the beginning of our internet and our social media
Yeah.
outreach, to the opportunity then when Sam stepped aside to throw my hat in the ring with the board of directors. Of course, we're in the HR business, and they formed a
Yeah.
little search committee. And I said, I think it's very important for me to at least be considered here. I had Sam's endorsement, and that was in late '98, early '99, and the rest is history.
That's amazing. You have been involved in this industry for a very, very long time, and thank you for all the work you do. I too am very passionate about staffing. I came from a staffing business, by the way. I'm not a banker. My family was in staffing, essentially a specialty staffing business. I started my first company in the '90s. Started my family very young. Did that for a while, and I was using accounts receivable financing to grow my business. And I thought, I really had more of a finance background. I loved that, so I sold that business, and in '99, I started financing staffing companies. So I've been doing it a long time as well. And I'm still passionate as ever about it. Every day, I love getting up. I tell my friends, they're like, why don't you golf more? I go, you know what? Helping finance staffing companies was a lot more fun than my my golf game. So it's just an enjoyable thing to do every day. I love I love really the tone of this industry. It just attracts people who really love people. It's a very interesting industry in that way. It's a very enjoyable entrepreneurial spirit, So it's nice to see that you've been along for the ride and around it for many more years than I have been. But it's been. It looks like I guess we're both going into our well, you in your 30th year, and mine in my 20s here of being in this business.
A little more than 30 years, and it's a blink of
Yeah.
an eye. I mean,
Right? So
I
fast.
look in the mirror in the morning, and I kind of see some indication of my chronological age, but
Yeah.
my biological, and my wife will probably tell you my emotional age
Yeah.
is quite a lot of distance between
Yeah.
those two, and I wouldn't have it any way.
You are a young spirit. I love it.
Yeah, to pick up on something that you said,
Yeah.
one of the real joys for me is when I get to talk to executives that come
Yes.
from other sectors
Right.
and they come into our industry, Paul.
Yeah.
And in some cases, I mean, it's been kind of heads down, and they've been involved with building organizations
Right.
that provide important products and services, but it really is around a P&L sheet.
Yeah.
I talk to them and they say, Richard, I heard all this stuff when I was being recruited, but
Yeah.
last week I got to go out and be in one of our branch offices, and I got to actually watch one of our recruiters in action, and then I got to see some people come into the office, and they had all the anxiety that people typically have when they go in for a job interview, something that most of us don't do all that frequently, and so most
Right.
of us aren't too good at it. He said, and then I see what happens when the magic occurs, and we make a connection,
Yeah.
and it's life
Connecting
changing.
people.
And all of a sudden, they find a deeper connection to this
Yeah.
new business, this new industry that they're part of. And
Right.
you're quite right. I mean, we're in the people business.
Yep.
We are so proud, and
Yeah.
I tell this to my children and now my grandchildren.
Yeah.
Is what is it that you do? And I said, well, we connect people with opportunity.
Yeah.
We bring
Real
efficiency,
human connection. That's still what we're
real
about.
human connections. We
Yeah.
touch in the course of a year. It
Yeah.
depends upon the year, but in the past year,
Mhm.
something in the neighborhood of 12 million lives in
Right.
America
It's amazing.
who have worked with as a temporary contract employee or as a candidate, and
Yeah.
that's a daunting responsibility. But let's leave daunting out of this.
Yeah.
What an amazing opportunity and
It
a
is.
gift that we have had as an industry. And if we discharge those opportunities and responsibilities correctly, and when the magic happens, people ought to be able to go home at night, and when their heads hit the pillow, go, I
Yeah.
did some good today.
I agree. I agree with that. And just the ability to see how we are able to help impact, the masses of people that are trying to make a living and do something for their lives here. And then also from the entrepreneurial side to see how our opportunities really allow people from diverse backgrounds and from very humble beginnings to be able to create some real enterprise value for themselves, for their families, and be able to give back to their candidates and their the temporary staff. It's really it's a very interesting giving role. Like so much of what we do is the bedrock of what American society is about, and the American dream is about, is what I see. And that's something I always talk about all the time, is that really we're in that business of being able to enable people's goal set to be able to join something that is an amazing dream. So you deal with so many different companies over the year, talking to staffing agencies. I'm really curious, Richard. Um, if you looked at the top three things that's really on their minds right now, what would that be? Like, if staffing owners, do you have one, two, or three things that's just really top of mind here in 2024?
Sure. The number one top of mind issue, and this cuts across most firms in the industry.
Hmm.
Before we began, you and I talked a little bit about some clients that you're working with, and so
Yeah,
in every economy, in every industry, there are companies that outperform the competition.
that's
But
true.
what has happened in the staffing industry as we tipped into COVID and first the entire country, shut down, and
Yeah,
literally people were prohibited from going to work and driving on highways, and
right,
it was a global pandemic,
right.
something that none of us had ever experienced, and I hope we will never live long enough to experience
I
something like that.
agree.
The industry was decimated in the short term. I mean, we
Yeah,
lost one third of our assignments, and so we
yeah.
lost one third of our revenue, and
Hmm.
it was absolutely brutal. And
It
staffing
was.
firm executives that had been through a recession, an actual
Hmm.
recession, not just a little bit of a dip,
Yeah,
before, had never seen anything like this. And the
right.
good news is that the country opened back up again. And when the country opened back up again, we did what we do best, and that is to mobilize
Yeah,
workforces and to try to get America running again.
yeah.
At the very early days of the global pandemic, again, our magazines and our digital file cabinets are just chock full of stories of the important role that our industry played on the front lines. That's kind
Yes,
of intuitive as healthcare workers, but it was the entire healthcare supply chain. It was
right.
everybody from out there helping stick folks in the arm with vaccines
Yeah,
to really ramping up as hospitals and acute care facilities were taking on more and more patients, some of which never actually made it. But it was more than that. As people
hmm,
were shut into their homes, the essential things that we take for granted when we hit a couple of buttons on a digital app, and we expect that we'll get the groceries.
yeah.
We expect that we'll
It
get
changed our behavioral expectations is really what it did.
it did, but
Hmm.
people don't think about how the magic happens behind the scenes, and
Right,
it's really around human beings. And so we were sourcing into every industry in the United States that was providing essential goods and services. I
yeah,
mean, from the grocery stores to the pharmacies,
right.
to the logistics centers and the warehouses. We were also continuing to source into the professions, which includes, some people don't understand, that our industry is sourcing into every occupation in the United States,
Right.
and we're sourcing individual scientists at the National Institutes of Health. You can kind of connect the dots there between the
Yeah.
important roles that people in our industry play. So back to your question about top of mind issues. So the industry began a rocket ride
Yeah.
where demand was never ever more at a higher level.
Yeah.
And we literally, I would hear stories from some of our members who say, Richard, I got a call from one of our, legacy clients. In a good year, they'd say, send me 50, 60 people. This morning, I got a call and they said, I need 80. And by the way, if you can send me 100. And by the way, if you can send me 120, send every single one of them. And and,
Amazing.
and, and don't do all that stuff that, normally I'm kind of picky and I
Yeah.
want to I want to see all of these screens and filters. You're still going to have to do some screens and filters, but
Yeah.
let's
Get
take the
me
friction
people.
out of the process. I need him here and I need him here this afternoon.
Yeah.
This was across the board.
Yeah.
HR departments had been decimated. In many cases, the layoffs that occurred as companies shut down, many of them didn't get brought back and didn't
Yeah.
get brought back for months and months. So now we were outsourced HR departments and we
Yeah.
were outsourced solutions providers across American industry. And all of a sudden, American businesses went on a hiring rampage like we had never seen.
Never seen it. Never seen
I
anything like it. It was amazing.
it was wonderful to see,
Yeah.
but you and I've been around long enough to know that be careful what you wish
That's
for.
right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes those peaks
Yeah.
end up turning into valleys on the other
Yeah.
side. And there was a bit of a rational hiring exuberance.
I agree.
And there was a sense, an optimistic sense that, that growth curve would continue to accelerate upward. And that's why they were adding on all of the staff they were
Yeah.
adding. It was temporary contract and direct hire.
Yeah.
Our members direct hire and temp to hire business had never been as big. Some of them had to kind of take a look at their business models because they had deliberately set a ceiling on how
Yeah.
many temp to hire, how many direct hire conversions they were going to be making.
Hmm.
So it was the best of times, and now we're going from 20 to 21, and the industry is on just a kind of a rocket like level of acceleration. And then things began to slow down as we got deeper into 22 and into
Right.
23. And while there was, a lot of economic discussions about whether or not the recession that everybody was expecting after 9 years,
Hmm.
unprecedented, going into 10
Right.
years of growth,
Yeah.
unprecedented. We have little economic
Yeah.
corrections. That's called a cycle. If it's deep enough and long enough, it's called a recession. So for our industry, clearly, we saw a recession coming out of COVID after
Right.
that post-hiring bump. But technically, the United States didn't get into what the economic arbiters of recession, would signify is an actual recession
Right.
induced by COVID. So now things begin to slow down because the demand curve was beginning to flatten for businesses, services, and goods. And businesses found that they probably had talent benches that were as full as they had ever been. The other piece, of course, of this angst around the talent benches was after people were sent home and did a little bit of remote work, they started looking at options, and they
Yeah.
saw that hiring was never hotter. And we had something that was labeled accurately so the Great Recession.
Yeah.
The Great Recession was probably the most challenging time for the industry, but one of
Yep.
the best times for the industry
Yep.
because it created a level of churn.
Yes, it did.
Employees felt emboldened because they were in
Hmm.
the driver's seat, and
Yeah.
companies were saying, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" And
Hmm.
so we were at the right place at the right time. But then things began to slow down a little bit as employers said, "You know what? Our talent benches are actually quite full." And as we kind of got into 23 and certainly through 24, we're seeing a lack of labor market churn. One of the indexes that we follow is labor leverage ratios.
Yeah.
And so we see two dynamics. On the one hand, we see businesses, and you hear terms like labor hoarding. Businesses are saying, we're going to hold on to the people we've got.
Yeah.
We're not
Gonna
going to make
upskill them. we're gonna keep them.
upskilling.
Yeah.
Another great topic to talk
Right.
about.
Right.
So where we have been is businesses have kind of been in a state of hold by and large.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happened at exactly the same time was we were seeing the inflation rates creep up and up
Right.
and up. So the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell decided that they were going to have to pull one of their big two levers, and they got the two levers. One is around inflation, and that's the interest rate lever,
Yeah.
and the other one is around employment, and that's the unemployment rate. And those two kind of work in opposite. And so we would hear well-intended, intellectual economists from the Fed say the economy is going to have to experience a significant rise in the unemployment rate. It may have to go up to 5 to 6%, or we are going to be straddled with inflation
Yeah.
that is going to really be detrimental to the economy and eventually to consumers. No good playbook for that COVID-induced recession for our
Right.
industry. No good playbook coming out of a global pandemic. And I don't really indict my friends in the Federal Reserve. However, they've got some real lessons that they learned, and
Yeah.
so they began putting their foot on the gas pedal, or to pull that lever around interest rates. And we went through an increase in interest rates at a clip that the United States had never ever
No.
experienced before, and they went up and up and up and up and up and up. And we began to beat on our drum back in 22 and 23 that, look, I know it's an easy thing to, kind of put down on paper. We're going to raise the interest rates a little bit. We're going to raise unemployment a little bit, and we're going to solve the problem. And it was like, do you guys realize that for every percent of unemployment that you affect, we're talking about 1 million people, 1 million families that are going to
Million
be
lives, million families. It's amazing.
and
Hmm.
so it's easy to kind of be objective and
Yeah,
academic about this, but where we live, you're talking about people's lives. And oh, by the
yeah,
way, if you think that this is going to be the cure all and be all for the economy, guess what's going to happen to these people that lose their jobs? They are A, not going to be contributing to the tax base.
yeah,
Uh, B, they are going to be drawing upon the systems, those that are eligible, and certainly temporary employees that are W 2 employees of
yep,
staffing firms, and our clients' employees. They're going to begin collecting unemployment
right,
insurance. Those that qualify for other social transfer payments, such as Medicare and some of the food stamp and child welfare programs, they're going to begin to utilize those because they don't have a job.
right.
So all of a sudden, expenditures are going to continue to go up, and yes, you may get that inflation rate down. And by the way, with higher degrees of unemployment, um, you're gonna crack one of those other golden eggs that are laid by the goose, and that's around consumption by consumers.
That's right.
One of the big drivers of our economy has
Yep,
been, continues to be today. So we began banging the drum and urging the Fed to stop raising and to start lowering, start lowering,
yeah,
start lowering. We were one of many voices, but we
uh,
certainly heralded the day when Powell and company said
yeah,
we're gonna begin pushing that lever back
right,
again. And
right.
so we've seen the first 50 basis point reduction in interest rates, which is
Yep,
a good first step.
right.
So, a long answer to your question, top of mind for staffing companies. What's happening with our industry? Because by and large, when you can look at a couple of different metrics. You can look at industry revenues. You can look at industry employment, and it plateaued
Yep,
after peaking, and then it began to decline. And it
yep.
has actually, we have seen in the ASA staffing index numbers, which
Hmm.
track employment week after week after week, and the BLS numbers that come out every single month, we've seen decline
Yep,
in staffing demand for the past 2 years. So the number one question on the top of every staffing executive's mind is when is that going to turn around?
right. When is the return to growth, putting people back in seats, going to happen with that 50 basis point drop? Is that going to equal 2 million of new positions here in the fourth quarter and first quarter? Or how is this going to play out? Is it going to, did they avert a train wreck by stopping soon enough? I agree with that 100%. Really, where is the next step? That's number one. I agree with that.
So number one, the economy and
Yeah,
our piece of it.
yeah,
We've got a lot of stuff that we've written over the years that was true until it wasn't.
yeah.
Around staffing, I've talked to so many economists and the business press over the years, and I would proudly talk about the role that staffing has played
Yes,
historically. Staffing employment is an indicator,
it
and
is.
most of the business press got it kind of right, and they'd say, well,
Mhm.
it's an important economic indicator. And there are indicators that the conference board and others follow, and some are leading indicators, some are coincident indicators, and some are lagging. Employment is historically been considered a lagging indicator. Businesses begin to add after they have seen the uptick in
Mhm.
demand.
Mhm.
Sometimes they're smart enough to kind of gauge the cycle. Staffing employment is actually considered to be a coincident economic indicator. So historically, you kind of take a look at what's happening with staffing and look at staffing levels and staffing revenues and go, yeah, that kind of mirrors the economy, at least in periods of time when we're seeing roughly a 2% increase of GDP. We have been a leading indicator, however, around employment. So for
Right.
labor markets. So for many, many, many years, we had data that could quantify that you would see a downturn in staffing demand. And if it was sustained and over a period of enough months, you could say that that's a pretty good indicator that something's happening in the economy. And kind of hang on to your hats and cinch your belts tight because we may be tipping into an economic correction. It might even be a recession. And that's been the case in most of these economic cycles, especially the ones that have turned into recessions. It was true until it wasn't. And as we went into the Great Recession, and we saw, workers lose their jobs in numbers greater than had ever been seen since the
Yeah.
Great Depression.
Yeah.
Something interesting happened on the other side. staffing was growing and growing
Yeah.
and growing as predicted, um, but overall employment was not keeping up, and
Yeah.
the unemployment rates were higher than any economist would have expected or wanted, and so we went into a period called the jobless recovery. Where are
Yes.
the jobs? And we're in an election year now, and this was a big issue in the Obama administration as they were, counting jobs and how many really were coming back. So all of a sudden, the economists and the business reporters that I was talking to saying, "Look, we're seeing the uptick in staffing, so this is presaging, an uptick. It should be in labor market demand overall, but it didn't."
It didn't
So
work.
we
It
did
didn't
we
happen
did
this time. Yeah.
we did pretty well as an industry, but and you say, well, why was that? And it was just one of those inflection point periods, I think, Paul, where
Yeah.
uh, in, businesses were focusing on productivity, and they
Yeah.
learned after shedding all of those workers that maybe they need to deploy those human resources more effectively, more efficiently, or differently.
Agreed.
For our industry, it was an opportunity again to say, look, here are the value propositions that we bring to you, both in terms of sourcing and screening talent, but also really helping you in terms of your human capital management utilization. Utilize workers more effectively. No business wants to hire people that 6 months later they've got to let go.
Right.
It's a morale buster, and it's also a huge expense.
Right.
So we began to see a little bit of a rift between the predictive quality of staffing employment and the overall economy. Where we saw the really big separation was after the global pandemic
Yeah.
induced recession for our industry, where we saw that labor markets were growing again, but staffing demand was not. And that's been a question, a concern, and a quandary that I think we just talked about. One of the big reasons that this has been the case for the past couple of years has been around labor hoarding. It's been around lack of
Yeah.
churn. It's decreased confidence on the part of job seekers to, just kind of
Right.
pick up and leave and move to another job.
Hmm.
And as we look at some of the groups that we work very closely with, like Indeed and LinkedIn, and we looked at their job posting numbers,
Yeah.
it tells the tale of the tape is that for the past 2 years, those job postings have plummeted and plateaued.
Yeah.
And so we've got a couple of variables here. We've got waiting for the interest rates to come down. At first, it hit some of the folks that you probably work with most frequently, and those are younger, emerging businesses and businesses that are seeking capital to expand. But these interest rates have impacted enterprise organizations,
Yes.
publicly traded, well-capitalized
Right.
organizations, and it has influenced the extent to which that they're putting into money into capital expenditures,
Right.
including human capital expenditures.
Hmm.
And with the the extra volatility of our little world is interconnected, and looking at some of the macroeconomic forces and events, and then the geopolitical forces and events that could turn economies in a number of countries or worldwide upside down. Just a lot of reasons to be wary. And then you ladle on top of that a presidential election, but it's hard to kind of separate some of the wheat from the chaff in terms of,
Yep.
of the rhetoric. And some of the rhetoric has got people in the business community quite anxious
Yeah.
and
There's
quite
anxiety.
concerned.
There's definitely
And
anxiety.
it's just kind of been a perfect storm for our industry. Good news
Yeah.
is we kind of see some light at the end of the tunnel, and it looks like actual light, not the light from that locomotive coming through the tunnel. And we see that confidence levels are beginning to come up as the interest rates are beginning to go down.
I
But
agree.
we both know, Paul, that once the Fed goes that goes
Yeah.
down 50 basis point, you and I don't see that at our local bank right
Yeah.
away. And so for consumers, it's gonna take a little while, and a little while is going to be weeks and months for the
Yeah.
business community as well. But we like the direction that it's going in. We believe that the indicators in terms of labor market reports and this morning's report on inflation
Yeah.
are probably in enough of a sweet spot that the Fed is likely to take another action, perhaps
Yeah.
in November and
Right.
December. Could be 25 basis points, but again,
Yeah.
that's good. We're
Yeah.
moving in a good direction where it's not going to be the American worker that is helping solve the U.S. economy's challenges with inflation.
Yeah.
So that was a long answer for number one. Number two, number three would be, I think, a lot shorter. Number two, number three is just the changes in the world of work, right? And
Yeah.
this is the there were unintended consequences that came out of the global pandemic.
Right.
And one of them was this intense focus on and almost exponential growth of automation, digitalization,
Yes.
robotics,
Right.
machine learning, giving us increased tools that have changed and are continuing to change all of our lives. For the staffing industry, the question is how do I drink from that fire hose and
Yeah.
actually
Right.
identify those technology solutions that are important for me to, at minimum, keep up and beyond that, to actually bring higher degrees of efficiency and productivity to my internal workforce and, most important, to my clients. So, a significant role that ASA has played is trying to be that aggregator. And on our technology platform, on our website, we have replicated what we brought to staffing world a number of years ago, which is a really strong emphasis on technology and
Right.
emerging technology solutions. You've seen it, exponential growth from that part of the world you used to live in San Francisco and Silicon
Yep.
Valley.
That's right.
There are so many tech solutions that are out there. And, many of them are bright-eyed young men and women who
Yeah.
are looking to kind of run something up and then sell it off and live happily ever after. Some of them have legs, some of them do not. But technology and how to use it to most effectively leverage opportunity. And the other side of it is, how not to be disrupted by
Right.
technology. And this is another big
How to find that sweet spot, how to adopt to the technology and use it, but not be disrupted, but at the same time not be on the bleeding edge is what I always tell my clients. If you want to be on the bleeding edge, let somebody else do that. But finding that sweet spot, boy, I agree with you. I think every conversation I have that people, entrepreneurs and staffing are grappling with what's the right balance of implementing technology. So I agree with both number one and two very wholeheartedly.
100%, and I'm with you. Is I kind of bit of a self-styled, tech nerd, tech geek. I love gadgets and
Me too.
love to be kind of bleeding edge. That's in my personal life.
Same.
In my business life, for this association, for our board, our members, I think my responsibility and the team here is to help ensure that we understand maybe what bleeding edge looks like.
Right.
We don't ignore it. But if we can get closer to leading edge
Yes.
solutions, that's the most important sweet spot. And that world continues to change at such
Yep.
rapid pace. We have seen, as a result of the digitalization of things, that the skills required within a majority of occupations have changed. The tools
Yes.
we use inside of a majority of occupations have changed or are going to change. And that gets to the issue of, do we have the workers that are
Right.
skilled,
Trained to use them. Absolutely.
and so, up at number three, and there are probably 33 of these things, but
Yeah.
up at number three is really around. You just say X, and it's not the organization formerly known as Twitter. It's around CX and EX,
Mhm.
employee experience and customer client experience.
Yeah.
What are we bringing to the table now that we've
Right.
got a workforce that's kind of figuring out, where they fit, and they've got anxieties about their world being
Mhm.
disintermediated by technology.
That's right.
And I've also have some new mindsets around, hey, I've kind of tasted remote work and I love it. And I've tasted flexibility and I love it. We're the people that really kind of industry that innovated largely,
Very true.
remote
Very true.
and flexible opportunities. And on the client side, the same thing. We kind of tend, you've seen it over your career in the staffing industry. uh, we're never in equilibrium, right? Typically,
That's
the
right.
industry has either got more people than they've got jobs, or more jobs than they've got people.
It's always
And
cyclical. There's always a supplier demand mismatch.
supply and demand, so there's never
Yeah,
equilibrium. And if you're looking for an industry where things are going to be predictable, this isn't it.
this isn't it. I
Uh,
agree.
but if you like challenge and growth, and you really feel as though there
Hmm.
are opportunities here to make a difference and outperform perhaps other businesses that you might have been in, this is a good place. So doubling down on what does it mean to add value? Yeah, we're
Yeah,
very good at filling seats, filling requisitions. If there's a mindset in the customer community that Paul's staffing service and Richard's staffing service are basically sourcing from the same pool,
right.
and essentially they're finding the same candidates,
Hmm.
what's the first thing that's going to pop into the head of that client? Well, let's play Paul and Richard against each other in
Right,
terms of price.
right.
To the extent that any industry finds itself, in that morass
Yeah, yeah.
of selling based on price and
Mhm.
not added value,
Yeah.
it's an industry
Then it's
that's
just a race to the bottom, and
a
and
race
it,
to the
and
bottom.
unfortunately, you see that in some of our sectors and in some of our geographies. But it's a challenge. I agree.
So we got the challenge of commoditization,
Yeah.
and I've often said is we convene client panels where client panels have admitted, yeah, we sometimes do view you all as a commodity, and the
Yeah.
question is why is that? And the quiet answer is because you let us.
Yeah. Well, it's
Wow,
because it missed that
dang.
number three, what you just said. It's because sometimes some of our agencies that play in that game, they forget that whole customer experience, employee experience, and the fact that that piece of the puzzle is so important to the overall value equation, right? And I think that's a very interesting insight.
So around employee experience, the other thing that happened,
Hmm.
and this is an unintended but not so positive a
Hmm.
consequence of the pandemic.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've got a young woman that we hired, and boy, does she represent Generation Z well. I mean, work ethic and come to work looking for opportunity to make a difference. But she got disrupted. I mean, one of those that graduated in 2020 virtually, and you look at the young people that had a couple of years were being taught at home remotely. You look at the impact that having to be shuttered away and working at home has had on the mental well-being of American people all over the world. There's a different opportunity, a different challenge, and a different need that employers, whether they're staffing firm employers or client employers, need to put more focus on. And in this regard, we have worked with the Gallup organization for years and years and years, and they've got the employee engagement index, and I highly recommend to all businesses of all kinds. If you've not done it, sample your employees with the Gallup Q12. What we're seeing is Gallup measures engagement levels in the United States and all over the world, and we're seeing that engagement levels intuitively have gone down as a result of the pandemic. What does this mean? It means that you people are maybe not capable of bringing their whole selves to a job, and there are opportunities for people to help themselves, but also opportunities for employers to help them, and opportunities for staffing firms if they can get it right internally. They can bring these same kind of concepts around engagement, and if you can't measure it, you're not going to be able to move the needle on it. I give a shout out to one of our corporate partners, a company founded by Eric Gregg, clearly rated, does employee satisfaction surveys of your internal employees, client satisfaction surveys of your clients, and of your contract and your temporary employees using the now very well known and understood Net Promoter rankings. So what's the Net Promoter score? And it happens in the industry. Employee Net Promoter scores will plummet when jobs are more scarce and candidates don't get the job or they don't get the attention that they should. So, big opportunities for our industry, not only to increase engagement levels with our internal workers, but to bring some of those metrics to our clients.
That's great. Well, that's a great list, a great top three list, and I appreciate it, Richard. This has been great. I think we'd love to let's finish it up and bring it home with one of your my favorite subjects, which is the annual Staffing World Conference, which is really the preeminent American Staffing Association conference. I know that you look at all of these things that are top of mind to the members, and you help to mold the conference around those to answer those questions. I am quite sure, and so. Let's talk a little bit about Staffing World. Just a couple weeks here in Nashville. If somebody's on the fence to come or not to come this year, what would you like to say to them?
I would say right now inside of your business, you're involved with, or others are involved with, the beginning of strategic planning slash budgeting for 2025. And because the sands have shifted and are continue to shift in our industry, the big question is, where do the opportunities lie for me and my company, and for our industry at large? What are some of the things that I might be able to, avoid a long and painful learning curve if I can get together with others who have been there and done that, or I can at least kind of collaborate with folks as we're trying to figure out a good direction for the industry. We like to say that we're going to play an increasingly important role in shaping the future of work and the future of workforces. So we've got something for everyone at Staffing World. It is the largest gathering of industry professionals anywhere in the world. So we do call it Staffing World. The expo you're very familiar with, and we'll see you and your team there.
Absolutely, we'll be there.
We've got 180 of the leading. It sounds hyperbolic, but the leading providers of staffing services and staffing solutions.
That's right.
And it's staffing, it's recruiting, and it's workforce solutions in that expo hall. So number one, you're going to be able to in one spot talk to, compare, and learn from. And we've got really cool things again in the expo hall this year, including our knowledge hubs, and it's kind of generational, and I understand it. We're going to give you deep dives, and we're going to give you really fast, really intense little clips in 10-minute presentations around every single topic that's top of mind for an industry member, a staffing professional. We'll have representatives from the C-suites, from our nation's and world's leading companies, and we'll have folks, in pretty much every occupation within a staffing firm there. And we've got programs and learning experiences and fun. So I mean, it's around networking, it's around learning, it's around collaboration. It's also fun. And this year we're going to have even more fun in the expo hall. We're going to do something called Staffing's Got Talent.
Oh, how fun!
In the expo hall on Tuesday, we're doing a special silent auction for one of my favorite programs I'm so proud of. This is our Women in Leadership initiative that we launched a number of years ago, and we've got a pre-convention program called Thrive. This is the live version of the Thrive virtual program that we do in the spring of each year, and this is about empowering women and women leaders. And there are few things that have gotten this industry more excited than the time and the attention and the networking and the momentum that we built around that. So that will be a 2-day pre-convention show on the 21st and 22nd, Thrive Live, and then on the evening of the 22nd, after the opening keynote this is right in your wheelhouse. Probably one of the preeminent purveyors of mindset, growth mindset, exponential growth mindset.
I'm very excited about it.
That's Peter Diamandis.
Absolutely. Peter's great.
Got to know Peter. We had him at Staffing World in, I think, 2016.
Yep.
He has just gotten involved in so many new moonshots, as he calls them. And so he's going to share his vision for the world and for our industry in terms of where he sees the opportunities. But if you come to the program, and you'll see that we've got an operations track, we've got a sales track, we got a recruiting track, we've got executive tracks. We've really covered the spectrum, and more workshops than people can attend. If you bring a delegation, you can kind of deploy very strategically, and then you can pick up on the recordings after it's all said and done. But this is the opportunity for the industry to get together. And I know you hear politicians say this is the most important election of a lifetime. every candidate for office, at least at the presidential level,
Yeah.
likes to say that. I think that just where we're at as an industry right now, the conversations that we're going to be having, I'm really looking forward to kind of pulling apart, looking at the
Yep.
industry as objectively as possible, saying, here we are, here's where we can do some things better, some things a little bit
Yep.
differently. But here are some exciting opportunities for the industry and for industry leaders
Yep.
and folks who aspire to become industry leaders to leverage. So thank you for asking. I know you're going to be there. We're
Absolutely. We're
looking
going to be there with
forward
a
to
big
seeing you.
contingent. Yeah, we're excited to be there. Well, we love being at Staffing World, but I appreciate what you mentioned about really this being a very important year. I agree. I think we've been in such unusual times, and then moving out of the very strange and challenging, unusual times, we've started to try to get back to this leveling to what is this new normal. But I feel like we're at an inflection point that is going to mean really the planning now is going to set our next 5 year goals in business so dramatically. So I agree. I think it's extremely important. I am thrilled to have you on as a guest today. It's been great to be able to have the conversation around really how important your organization is to the industry, and for that, thank you. But I also appreciate so much the focus on what's top of mind and how you've really built the association's biggest event of the year around helping people really think about and challenge themselves to be able to say, am I going to be a leader or am I going to be a follower? And I think that's one thing I always say to my clients, even in down years, quote, down years, if you're always leading on growth and you constantly are thinking, how do I take more market share? You can grow the business. And I find that when you come to Staffing World, you can see what your competition is doing, and that's really what gets the creativity going. What am I going to implement now that's going to be meaningful for my business and meaningful for my family? So I appreciate it. I can't wait to see you there, and we're going to be there in just a couple of weeks, so this is going to be great. I think it's been amazing to have you on today, Richard. This is great. Thank you so
Well, I
much.
appreciate the opportunity, and if I may, I'll leave you and your
Please.
viewers with one last thought.
Sounds good.
This is an election year, and when the team and I meet with the men and women up on Capitol Hill and in the White House and in the administration, we do not come wearing any sort of partisan label of
That's right.
any kind. There's no R, there's no D, there's no I or something else,
Yeah,
because there's nothing political about jobs and
I agree.
employment. We are fundamental to who we are as human beings on this planet. But the decisions of an uninformed regulator, policymaker, can shape our industry in the wrong
Yes.
direction forever. The United States enjoys the best regulatory climate in the world for our industry to create jobs and empower people and create efficiencies for business. It's not an accident. The
I
only
agree.
organization in the industry in the United States that works on the front line with policymakers at the state level, at the municipal level, and certainly at the federal level and in the courts is the American Staffing Association. One important role that all of our members, everyone in the industry can play. A, we want you to go out and vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but I want you to be involved in the process. But most important, I want you to get to know your legislators. They need to know that in Peoria, Illinois, and in Princeton, New Jersey, that you put X number, 120 people, 1,020 people, 10,000 people to work.
Hmm.
Everyone you put to work is a voter. They see that, they hear that, they understand that it's jobs. And the worst thing that can happen to us is if somebody gets, here's a proposal that sounds pretty reasonable and well intended, but could have disastrous consequences for our industry. And we fought back a number of them this year in the United
Hmm.
States at both the state level and at the municipal level. We as an industry will have many, many, many more of those victories if we don't have to go in there. And I think people can relate to this. If we go in there and have to make a cold call,
Yeah.
I'm calling you up and I'm saying, Senator, you don't know me, but as
Right.
opposed to
That's
I
some.
call you up and I say, Paul, may I call you Paul? Of course, Richard, you can. We've
Mhm.
known each other for years.
Yeah.
Paul, I got to tell you, I just heard that there's a bad bill that's going to come across your desk. We need to talk about this. This could be a
Right.
job killer in your state,
Yeah.
and that opens the door for you to get a hold of ASA, our amazing legal team, to load you up with data. we've had to retain lobbyists in as many as 30 states
Wow.
to make sure that the industry's interests are protected, well served, and advanced.
Yeah.
So in this all important election year, there's still time
Mhm.
to do a little bit of outreach.
Yeah.
Get informed. Don't vote based on the little snippets that you see on television or you hear in the campaign ads. Find out what people's position is on job creation, which is where we live, and that means support of Republicans and support of Democrats. But we've all got a lot on the line, and we've got a lot of responsibility. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to throw that little extra pitch in there.
Absolutely. Sounds great, Richard. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And audience, that's a wrap on another episode of the Growth Game podcast. Please make sure to, by the way, our podcast is one of the most diverse and one of the most published in staffing. So please make sure to recommend it to your friends in staffing. Make sure to subscribe and continue to get the great information that we're putting out on pattern matching growth and being able to make sure that we're, as a staffing organization and staffing companies, that we're planning for the future. So it's been great. That's a wrap. Richard, thank you again for being my guest and appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you in person in a couple of weeks.
See you in Nashville. Thanks,
Thank you,
Paul.
Richard.